Got it?
All right, well, I don't need to introduce myself because there was an ample introduction of myself. I did grow up in Florida. I studied wetlands because I grew up in Cape Coral, and I don't know if you're familiar with Cape Coral, but there's water everywhere, and there was literally not a drop to drink when I was a kid. And I really wanted to understand why. And some wise teacher told me it's because of the wetlands. This all used to be a wetland, and now it's all pavement, so we don't have any water to drink. So we got the first desal plant. I don't know if you know that. I was in 3rd grade and took a field trip there, and it was like amazing to learn how they desalinated water so that I can drink. But we didn't drink the water from the tap because it was horrible. So we always bought bottled water. So I grew up in this mix of water's everywhere. There isn't anything to drink. We've spent all this money to remove the salt from it, but we're not going to drink it anyway because it tastes terrible. So we're going to buy bottled water. And that just formed like who I became and what I started studying. I did a lot of work on microplastics research as a result of my bottled water drinking, which is depressing. The next slide, please. We work with everyone, residents, government agencies, the media, our partners, and the public to keep our waters clean.
In the last 10 years, we've been successful in keeping over 1 trillion gallons of sewage out of our local waterways. Organizations like Suncoast Waterkeepers are essential to what we do here. In any given year, especially lately, we've been running well over 15,000 people through here a year. So water quality is very important to us.
Right now, I'm in one of my favorite spots on the Suncoast, and it's one of my favorite spots because of the proliferation of mangroves like you see behind me. You're so important to this ecosystem.
All right, so that's about us. Hopefully you got everything you needed to get out of that video. So our mission then is to provide clean water for all through advocacy, litigation, community engagement like I'm doing now, and water quality monitoring, which has really become environmental monitoring because we're starting to pick up on a mangrove monitoring program. And so I have in the back information on how you can volunteer. And so if you have a boat and you want to volunteer, we'd love to have you host a mangrove monitor on your boat. We're going to go out every year in October to monitor a patch of mangroves. So you'll be in charge, you'll kind of adopt a patch, and you will drive to that area, and you'll bring somebody who's a drone pilot with you, and that drone pilot will fly that area with their drone, and then you also bring a spotter who's looking out for the drone, and then all that data will come back to me, and I will crunch it, and we'll learn how mangrove extent and density has changed over time. And that's really important because mangroves are intrinsically tied, not just our health and our well-being, but they're tied to our fisheries and our economy. And so they're also tied to our resilience from storms. So mangroves are super important. And so understanding their extent and their density over time and how that changes with influence from development and sea level rise is going to be super important. So as you heard Justin say in the video, what Suncoast Waterkeeper has been around for over 10 years. And really the bread and butter of the organization has been litigation. So it was founded by an environmental lawyer, Justin Bloom, who you saw in that video. And basically what he learned, he was with the Waterkeeper Alliance before he started Suncoast Waterkeeper. And the Waterkeeper Alliance is a global organization Suncoast Waterkeeper is a part of. So the Waterkeeper Alliance has 360 groups around the world, and Suncoast Waterkeeper is just one of those groups. There's 15 groups of waterkeepers in the state of Florida. Again, Suncoast Waterkeeper is just one of those groups. So we work with the Alliance, but then we also work with Waterkeepers Florida at a statewide level to do a lot of tracking of legislation. And this year was a doozy. I don't know if you track this legislative session, but it was a doozy for everybody across the board. If you could just go back real quick. So litigation, we got real early involved in sewage. Sewage was running amok, and municipalities from around Tampa Bay and also around Sarasota Bay were not abiding by their Clean Water Act permits, and that was an issue. And so what Justin did was he did research to ensure that, that they had the ability to abide by the permit. The permit was the right permit, meaning it was a fair and just permit. And that they had they had not just the skills, but also the resources to abide by it. And if he was going to fight it in court, they had the resources to solve the problem. So what Suncoast Waterkeeper did is we sued 5 different municipalities over their immense amount of sewage spills. And so that together has stopped over 1 trillion gallons of sewage from entering Tampa Bay and Sarasota Bay, just those lawsuits alone, because not only do they have to stop dumping, but they also have to invest in infrastructure. So we haven't gotten an exact amount of infrastructure investments, but Sarasota County alone, after our lawsuit and our settlement, invested over $25 million in infrastructure in the first 5 years. Now you multiply that by the city of Bradenton, the city of, there's actually a bunch of cities that I can't remember that are in the Tampa Bay watershed. And what we have is a lot of investment into sewage infrastructure, which is super important to stop sewage from going into the bay. And then not only does the city or the county have to invest in infrastructure, they also have to put money toward an environmental beneficial project. And so we've gained over like $500,000 in environmental beneficial projects. And that water doesn't come to Suncoast Waterkeeper. So Suncoast Waterkeeper doesn't get a dime of any of their litigation settlements. The money goes to pay the lawyers that we hire. And then the money also goes for these environmental beneficial projects. In the settlement, both parties agree which organization can do the work necessary to clean up or to enhance or to restore the area that was damaged by the sewage. And so most often it goes to the estuary programs because they're doing really good work and they're doing a lot of projects on the ground. Okay, now you can go. One thing we're doing in Manatee River is we're funding oyster restoration, which is why you see oysters on that screen. All right, so I heard you wanted to hear more about the fish farm. And so how many of you are familiar with the fish farm? All right, great. So that's one of our 7 lawsuits, and we're still in court on this issue. Although it's kind of at this weird place because what happened is we fought the permit that was given by the EPA to Ocean Era, the company who was putting forth this industrial size pilot fin fish farm out in the Gulf of Mexico. So it was going to be the first industrial scale fin fish farm ever in the Gulf. And that's a big deal. And so what we wanted to make sure was that the guardrails on the permit were super strict because we don't want the first one to be, basically lax so that the ones that follow a lax permit. We wanted to make sure there were strict environmental regulations. And so that's why we took it to court because we didn't think that the regulations were good enough, especially the monitoring aspect and also how much they were allowed to discharge and waste in an area that we know is the initiated area for red tide. So it's 40 miles off the coast where this fish farm is supposed to be, which also happens to be where red tide initiates for the Gulf of Mexico. Scientists have pinpointed 40 miles as being where red tide initiates. So it seemed like putting all that nitrogen, fish poop into that area is not wise. So that was another reason. What happened was an era, had other farms in Hawaii. Hawaii is way different, way deeper, much colder, totally different environment than the Gulf, which is much shallower and much warmer. And so they were going to create this. I guess it wasn't creating, but they were going to use Alamaco Jack. Sorry, I'm not like a fish expert. Am I saying that right? And so anyway, they were going to have Moat raise those fish for them. As it turns out, they couldn't raise the fish. So all the fairlings died. They couldn't figure out why they couldn't raise the fish. So they just said, we're not going to invest any more in this. We can't do this fish species. Well, at the same time, they got a permit for that fish species and for a certain type of cage that these fish were going to be in. well, no one would construct the cage. So the two main aspects of the permit, the type of fish and the type of cage, were no longer coming to fruition. And so they went back to the EPA and said, well, we're going to use a different cage and we're going to use a different fish, but we want to keep the same permit. And we were like, wait, what? No, you can't do that. So what the EPA said is they can't rescind the permit, but Oceanera can't use the permit for a different fish species and a different cage. So they'll have to reapply, although, that's not, certain. We don't know what they're going to do, but we do know that the EPA said certainly that they can't use the current permit the way it stands. They can't take away the permit because they don't have the authority to do that. But they would have to get a new permit if they're using different fish in a different cage. So that's where we're at with that. It's kind of in a legal, I don't know, neutral standstill. I'm not really sure. But so we're kind of just in this wait and see mode. All right, Piney Point. Piney Point, obviously, how many of you heard about Piney Point and all of the 212 million gallons that spilled of toxic waste into Tampa Bay? That was bad. And it still rains bad because I have 5 minutes. So it still is bad because researchers showed that the Piney Point liquid, or for lack of a better word, the Piney Point material, the Piney Point wastewater, went way further than anyone had imagined. So not only did it come south to Tampa Bay as they had modeled, but it went all the way north to St. Joseph Sound, which is way far away, over 30 miles away from the spot where it was discharged. And why is that important? Because the researchers also couldn't find all of it. So they were looking for the nutrient signature, and they knew that there was so much that went in. So certainly they were trying to find all of it to see where it went. And with their models, they couldn't find it all. So what they believe is that a lot of it is in the sediments, which will then leach out over time. So any hurricane will get leaching of these nutrients, which will cause harmful algal blooms and other things. So it also caused like one of the worst red tides right after that. I don't know if you remember that. So we're in court with that. That is a never-ending battle. They finally just got a MPDS permit, which is the permit that allows them to pollute. Everybody gets one. Every polluter gets a permit, and you're allowed to pollute this much. But if you go this much, you're over your permit and you can get in trouble. So what we're monitoring is how much pollution are they allowed to put in? And what we found is that the permit gives them way too much. Because right now, the bay is under a total maximum daily load, which means that go in that bay, and they're allowed to do way more than their fair share. So we're trying to get them to scale back. So we're working with EPA and working through the courts to make that happen. Yeah, no. So those are the main two things you guys wanted to hear about. And now I just want to tell you a couple things about how to get involved. Yeah, but I'm out of time, right? You guys need me to go. So, oh, okay. Well then, real quickly, have you heard about the radioactive roads bill that was passed by the state legislature? Like I said, it was a doozy. So it was passed, and then the governor did not veto it. He made no action. And when you make no action, that means it just automatically becomes law. So it became law on July 1st. And basically what the law allows is for the study of using phosphogypsum waste into roadway construction around the state. So the first there'll be a study, and then depending on that study, it could go everywhere. The thing is that the EPA has already studied this. It's already been studied, and we know that not only is radioactive material in those roads, but also it leaches phosphate and other nutrients that we don't want. It might not be phosphate, it might be nitrogen, to be honest, I don't know, but it leaches nutrients that we don't want in our waters. So there's the problem there. So what are we doing? There's not a whole lot you can do because it's already lost. So what we're working on, and we're working with partners to investigate how can we get phosphogypsum waste re-regulated. So right now it's regulated as special waste. It's not hazardous waste. There's a definition, there's a legal term for hazardous waste, and for some reason, phosphogypsum waste is not hazardous. It's other. And so because it's this other waste, it doesn't get regulated under RCRA and other things that regulate hazardous waste. So how can we get it into the right category of waste so it could be more stiffly regulated? and then they wouldn't be able to make roads with it. So that is our goal. Right now, how feasible it is, I'm not sure, but that is the effort that we're putting forth to reclassify phosphogypsum waste. Okay, and then we do a lot of water quality monitoring, like you heard Dave Tomasco, Sarasota Bay Estuary Program say. We monitor harmful bacteria in the bay because a lot of people like to swim in the bay, but they're not classified as swimming locations, so the Department of Health doesn't regulate or doesn't monitor them. So we monitor them just the way the Department of Health would, except for we do it much more often. We go out there every week. The Department of Health goes out every other week, and we collect from the same day of the week. Every Monday we go out and we collect samples from the same spot. We take it to the certified lab, just like the Department of Health and other municipalities do. And then we get those results. We put them on social media and on our website. And we also email them to all the municipalities who oversee those waterways. And basically what you need to know there is the barrier islands. If you get into the bay from a barrier island, you're mostly gonna be fine. You don't even have to worry about it. If you get in the bay from Sarasota, usually 50% or more of the time, the water's bad, and you should worry if you have a cut on your skin or anything like that. All right, and then if you want to get involved, there's this Eyes on the Suncoast program. You can take a picture of that if you want. Basically, what we want you to do is if you see something, we want you to say something. Recently, last Friday, I got a call early in the morning about an oil spill at Port Manatee. I don't know if you heard of that, but as soon as we heard, I called the Tampa Bay Waterkeeper. He called the Coast Guard, and they had somebody out there investigating. So it's because of people who like keep their eyes out and tell us about things that we can make swift action for an investigation. And then we follow up to make sure the agencies are doing their job. And then we report it back to whoever told us the issue. So we'd like more people to put their eyes on the Suncoast because we've done a really good job of taking away the point sources like sewage, but then now there's all these little sources of pollution that we really need to combat in order to make a big difference. Finally, I don't know, I mean, this is not in your backyard, but it's gonna affect Sarasota Bay, certainly. Manatee County is changing its wetland regulations. And so basically there's state regulations and then there was county regulations. Now the county's saying, forget it, we don't need to do this. The state already does a really good job. And we're saying, no, no, no. The state does not do a really good job. There's a long history of the state doing a really bad job at protecting our water quality. We would like the county to keep their protections in place because that is most important for ensuring our drinking water, because there's 3 drinking water sources within Manatee County for the city of Bradenton, for Manatee County, and it also comes to Sarasota County, and then also for the Peace River, which also comes to Sarasota County. So it's all connected and it's all important. Love for you to become a member. $25 a year, it'd be really awesome. Membership really helps us to grow and to do more. We have a lot of things going on. Tomorrow I have an environmental ambassadors program at Booker High that we're starting tomorrow. We have 10 youth at Booker High that we are going to work to give them the skills that they need to make a difference in their community. And we look forward to doing that program. But we do so much more, like the mangrove monitoring. We have the Eyes on the Suncoast program. And then we're also trying to get a pollution control team together, because when we have things like, you know, we heard about that spill at Port Manatee. Well, we're so busy doing everything else, we couldn't just drop everything and go out there. As it turns out, we couldn't gain access to the place anyway. But in the event that you do have access, it'd be really good to call on a volunteer that's a pollution action team that can go out there with supplies, whether that be a drone or just sampling equipment, and get what they need so that we could have make a really good report to the agency in charge of fixing the problem. And that's it. Thank you so much for your time. I'll take any questions if there's time. Yeah, so we don't collect any samples in the Gulf. We only collect samples on the Bay side. The Department of Health collects samples on the Gulf, and that program is called the Healthy Beaches program, and you can just Google Healthy Beaches and get their data and information. We collect on the Bay, and what I was saying is we collect in 11 areas. That's all we have funding for, but if we don't really come all the way down here to Siesta Key, our closest point, I guess, would be, what is it called? Bayfront Park. That's our closest one. And then we go north from there and then on to the barrier islands, Longboat. We'd be happy to come down here if you guys wanted to fund that. It's $1,100 a year to do the sampling. And we'd be so happy to send our technician down here. It's weekly sampling and we look for harmful bacteria. What we find is when we collect it from landside and not from Longboat or Anna Maria Island, the landside is about 50% of the time the samples are in the red zone. Like if it was a beach, they would close it if you have 2 samples in a row that are in the red zone. We go out every week. And so we've done the analysis, but I don't know off the top of my head, like how many 2 samples in a row there are. In some places like Palmasola Park, and I would probably also put Indian Beach in that category. They're like 70 to 80% in the red zone. So only 20% of the time should you not be concerned about going in there. So what does concern mean? It means that if you have a cut, you should be really careful. You should definitely rinse off after going into the water. You shouldn't get any in your mouth. Shouldn't get any in your eyes. And yeah, that's basically what it means. And if you're immunocompromised, you should definitely rethink going into that water when it's in the red zone. Yes, sir.
So do I understand correctly then that your data that lead to the county goes in like a no swim advisory, or does that mean the county's data?
It has to be the county's data, but we were just invited to submit our data into the state WIN database. WIN is an acronym, which I don't know what it means, but we get to put our data in there and we'll be doing that soon. It's a little bit of a bureaucratic nightmare, but we were invited to do that because we use a certified lab and we have a standard operating procedure that is identical to the state's. And so that data will be used to determine impairment of a water or whether or not it's attaining its standards. And so if it's not attaining standards, then it's called impaired. And then you have to limit the amount of pollution that goes in there for total maximum daily load. So like water quality soup right there. I don't know if you got that.
I guess what I was wondering is if they're every other week for testing and you're weekly, if they're not open to using your data to make a decision, then you could be swimming in a body of water that really shouldn't be because tests are too far.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're right. That's true. I mean, you can ask them to, you could, talk to your elected official and ask them if they can devote more resources to do more testing. You could also look at trends. They do some trends analysis and you can see like places like Venice Beach is closed like much more often than any place else because of that huge stormwater pipe that goes into that area. So there are known places that you should be more wary of. In general though, the beaches are clean. When I would want to look is like after Adelia, I would want to know like, well, first of all, no one should have been in the water. Just period. You should just know after a storm like that and there was flooding, just don't go in the water for at least 5 days. But then other times where like we haven't had any rain and then we have a huge rainfall, don't go in the water after that. That's usually when the beaches are bad. But most often they're good.